In the last video, we saw how to publish messages onto a Kafka topic from a Spring Boot application. In this video, we are going to see how to consume those messages from a Kafka topic from the Spring Boot application.
Press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss any update from Tech Primers.
So I'm in the start.spring.io. Let's create a Spring Boot application from the Spring Initializer. I'll reuse the group ID as com tech primers Kafka, and I'll create a project name Spring Boot Kafka consumer example, because this is going to consume messages from a Kafka topic. And I don't need the Spring MVC because I'm just going to create a standalone Spring Boot application. And let's add the dependency for Kafka, and I'll generate the project. Let me open the project in IntelliJ as well. So the project is open in IntelliJ right now. Let me see what is the file. Yeah, we have the main file, main class here, and I have the application.properties. By default, I'm going to use the port 8081, let's say, right? So that we don't have any conflict with the default 8080 port. And I need to create some Kafka configuration. Then I need to create a consumer, right? I need to create a listener basically. I'll just name it as listener, and I need a model because I might need to consume some JSON message. So by default, first I need a configuration. I'll just call it as Kafka configuration. Similar to the configuration which we had in the producer, we need to have similar configuration. So I'll annotate it with configuration so that Spring Boot can load this during the start. And the bean which we required here is the consumer factory. In the producer, we use the producer factory. So here we are going to use the consumer factory, and it expects of type something. So I'll just say string and string, because first what we will do is we'll consume a string message, and then later on we will move to consume a JSON message. We need to create this consumer factory. I'll just say return new default Kafka consumer factory, and this expects some configuration. And let's create this configuration. So this is exactly the same thing which we did in the producer as well, but here we might use the consumer config instead of the producer config. So we need to add some key and value. Here I'll use the consumer config to provide first we need to provide the bootstrap server configuration. I'll just move this. Since it is localhost, I'll just say 127.0. This is where my Kafka is running. So right now it is running in my local machine, so I'm using that as my bootstrap server. You should be able to get this from the configuration. We need to provide a group ID. I'll show you why we need to provide the group ID. For now I will just say group underscore ID. I'll just show you where it is useful later. Now we need to provide the key for the deserialization class. This would be string deserializer. In the producer we use the serializer class. Here we are going to use a deserializer class. Same way for the values, consumer config dot value deserialization class. We need to provide a string deserializer. I'm going to use a string for now, so I'll just provide a string deserializer. So our consumer factory is set. Now we need to inject this consumer factory onto our Kafka listener factory. Kafka listener consumer factory. We are going to use the concurrent Kafka listener container factory. I'll just say Kafka listener factory, and I'm going to create this concurrent. So we cannot provide it as a constructor, so I need to create a object, and then I'll just set this object. I'll just say factory.set consumer factory, and I'll just call that consumer factory so that we can directly use it here. and this will expect some object. I'll just say string string, and I'll just say string string here. So that way our container factory is using the string object, and I'll return this factory. So we are now set with the configuration. We have created the consumer factory configuration where we are providing some default configurations for the Spring Boot to identify this is where the Kafka is running, and these are the deserialization classes which it needs to use while converting the messages from the Kafka topic, right? And then we are setting that to the concurrent Kafka listener. This listener is required for Spring Boot so that it can inject onto the required class. Now where do we write the listener? That is why we created a package called listener. Let's go to that listener class and write some Kafka consumer listener. I'll just annotate it with service for now, and we need to provide a listener, right? Kafka listener annotation helps us in doing that. So whenever there is a message inside the Kafka topic, this particular listener will be called so that we can directly access the message here. So for example, I'll just say consume here, and the message which we are going to get will be coming in here directly. So we don't have to worry about anything else. So what I will do here is I'll just say consume message. So this is what we consume now. So I'm just printing the message which comes here. But how does it know which topic to get it from? So this is where we will provide the topic here. We need to provide the topic under the topics. We need to provide multiple topics if we have multiple topics. If we have only single topic, we can provide that. So we have this topic created in the last video, right? Kafka underscore example. I'm going to use that. Additionally, we have to provide something called group. So this is where the group configuration was helpful, where we created that group configuration here. So we said that this particular consumer factory comes under the group ID. So this particular configuration, whatever we have, right, this will be grouped into one group ID, and we can mix and match this group ID with different topics. Let's say we have a different topic, and there also we are going to use the spring message. We can use the we are going to use the string message. Then we can reuse this particular group ID, right? So that is why this group ID is helpful here. If we can have multiple listeners, we can have multiple topics to the same listener. That's what we can do here. Also, Spring Boot needs to identify that this particular Kafka listener is there. For that, we need to add the @enable Kafka annotation. So that way, Spring will now keep an eye on all the Kafka listeners. So this is something new in the consumer part. In the producer part, we don't require it because we did not have any listener. However, in the consumption part, we need a listener to be identified. So Spring Boot needs a handle to it, and Spring Boot needs to scan the code to know that okay, there I need to go and check for a listener. So that is why we are adding the @enable Kafka annotation. So I think we are set. Let's go and start the project. So meanwhile, let it come up. Let's go to the console here. So I already have the zookeeper running. So this is the zookeeper which is running, and I have the Kafka cluster also running. So this is the Kafka cluster. So there is only one node. Basically, there is only one zookeeper and one Kafka node, right? And I need to start a producer. There is an option in Kafka by default. There is something called Kafka console producer. I'm going to use that. Let's see, it has come. Okay, it is up now. So I have a Kafka console producer, and I'm going to listen to the same topic which we used here. So let's see if it is the same topic. Yeah, it is the same topic, right? Kafka underscore example. I'm just using the same topic, and I need to publish that particular message, whatever I need. So let me run this. So now the Kafka producer is ready to publish some message. What I will do is I'll just say hello YouTube, and let's see if this particular message is getting. See, right now there is nothing here. There are no messages here. Let me publish this message. I need to see it here. So yeah, we got it. So this is how we are able to publish the message from the console, and we are able to directly get it here. Let me show it real time. I'll just say hi tech primers. This needs to come there. See that, right? It is coming. Hello viewers. So all these messages are pushed now to the Kafka from here in the console, and automatically these are getting consumed using the listener, and these are getting printed here, right? So this is how you can consume messages, basically string messages from the Kafka topic using the Spring Kafka in a Spring Boot application. Now let's try using the JSON message. So I'll create a new model called user, which is exactly the same which we tried in the previous example, right? I'll say I have a name and a department. So I'll make it simple. I'll just have two fields. One is name, one is department. So I have that model ready now. We need to inject this model into the configuration here. So we already had only one listener factory, right? So we already had only one listener factory where we had string messages pushed onto it. So we are using a default consumer factory which was getting messages called string and string. Let's create a new consumer factory. I want to have this as well, right? So what I will do is I'll create a new one, and I'll publish that onto a new topic and see. I'll show you how we can listen to both the topics from the same consumer. So I'll just say consumer factory, and this is going to expect a message of type user. So I'll say user, and this is going to be user consumer factory, and this needs to return a new default Kafka consumer factory with some configuration, right? And the configuration I'll just copy from here, and I'll just do some slight modification. Here the group ID would be group underscore JSON, and here I'll use the JSON deserializer. Additional to whatever we are passing here, we need to pass the string deserialization class and JSON deserialization class of type user. So it's not expecting anything. Okay, it is expecting jserialization dot class. Okay, I'll just say user. It's expecting here user dot class. So that's it. So what I have done here is, since we are using a custom deserialization, we are going to provide that we are going to use JSON deserialization. However, use this particular model. In order to pass that model, we need to pass it to the default Kafka consumer factory as an argument. So that is what I'm doing here. In the old string one, right, we did not pass anything here, but here we have to pass these two because we need to get a custom message out of that Kafka. So that is what we are doing here. And I need to provide this consumer factory onto the Kafka listener factory, right? So what I'll do, I'll create a new Kafka listener factory. I'll just say consumer, I'll say user Kafka listener factory, and we need to create the same object concurrent, just say factory. I'll say factory dot set consumer factory, and here I'll use the user consumer factory, and I'll return this factory. We need to have this of type string comma user, string comma user. That's it. I'll just say open close. That's it. Yep, there are no errors, right? No warnings, nothing. Right. So we have now created two new configurations for our new JSON consumer factory, right? The user consumer factory basically. And let's use that in the consumer class now. So we already have one Kafka listener. I'll create one more Kafka listener, and I'm going to say use my Kafka underscore example topic, and I'll use a different topic in this case. So, and I'll say group is group underscore JSON, and there is an option to provide listener. Basically we can provide the container factory here. So what is the container factory? The container factory which we use is user listener factory. I'll just mention this so that we can directly use that specific container here, and I'll just say public void consume JSON, and I'll just say user and user. So that way directly the user message gets deserialized and comes onto this particular place. So consume the JSON message, and I'll just print that user. So let me go to the user class and I'll override the toString so that we know what we are printing. That's it. So I have just printed it, and one more thing we have to do is we need to publish onto the new topic, right? I have to create that particular topic. What I'll do is I'll just stop this consumer, or I will create a new tab, and I'll create this new topic. I created this topic called JSON, right? Underscore JSON. What is the topic name here? Underscore JSON, right? I'll just create this topic. Let this topic get created. Once this topic is created, I'll just consume the message from this particular topic now. So I need to provide a producer. So I need to run the producer on this topic, right? I'll just run the producer on this topic called Kafka underscore example underscore JSON. And now I'll provide JSON message onto this topic. Meanwhile, let me restart the Spring Boot application so that we have the Spring Boot application ready and we can publish the JSON message onto the new topic from the console. So notice here we have multiple serializers there, multiple listeners there. So what is it saying? Class cannot find. Okay, so this is because we need to add we created a JSON deserialization. However, we forgot to add that the XML dependency. We need to add the Jackson binding dependency here. Let's define that. I'll just say 2.6 dot. There's a 2.6.7. I'll just use the 2.6.7 version because that is what is compatible here. Let me run this project again. So the compilation is successful. Now let's go to the consumer part. The server is coming up. So if you notice here, there are two containers which got registered, right? The one is the Kafka, one is for the Kafka topic with the partition 0. The other one is the Kafka JSON for the partition 0. We created only one partition, so it is partition 0. Now if I publish a JSON message from this, so I'll just publish a JSON message. I'll just say name Sam and department as technology. So this is the JSON message I'm going to publish. Now that JSON message should be pushed onto the Kafka and it should come here directly. See here, there is a consumer exception. It says Kafka error deserializing key or value partition as Kafka at offset 0. So it's not able to deserialize, and this is happening because it's continuously consuming. Let me stop the consumer, but this is, let's see why this is happening. No suitable constructor found, cannot deserialize option, missing default constructor. Okay, so this is because I missed the default constructor here. What I will do is I'll just add a default constructor. So in the model which I had, I did not have a default constructor, so it was by default failing. So let me rerun this again. And if you notice here, already the message came in because the message was not consumed previously. So now it came in. Let me republish another message and we can see what's happening. I'll have it side by side. This time what I will do is I'll just publish a different name. I'll use Peter. I'll say Peter is from operations. Now this message should come by default here. Yep, see this? We got the message saying consume JSON message. Let's try publishing the string message which we already had, right? Here we already had the string publisher. Let's publishing string message. This also should come, but it should go to a different listener. See that? That also came. Publishing string message. I just had some typo there, right? But the consumers are all working. So we had two different listeners here in the consumer with two different topics and two different groups and with a different container. If you don't provide a container here, it will use the default one. But if you have a container, you can provide that directly. So what we did here is we created a Kafka configuration for the JSON. We had to provide the JSON deserializer, and we had to create a new JSON deserialization class with the model which we need to convert it to. So that is what we need to provide by default. And this consumer factory, we need to provide it to the concurrent Kafka listener container factory, which will be useful when we are consuming from the listener end, which is here. Spring Boot will by default inject the data into this particular method once it consumes and deserializes with whatever configuration we provided. And if we need any custom factory, we can provide that here. So since we had two different listeners with two different message types, we used a custom factory and we provided that here, and Spring was able to consume those messages, right? Additional to that, we had to add the uh, at enable Kafka annotation in order to make Spring Boot understand that there is a Kafka listener running in this particular project. Along with that, we had to now add the Jackson data bind dependency. I have added the 2.6.7 version of Jackson data bind, which will be required in the application while it is decoding the message from the string to the JSON. So it will be required when we convert that message to the model. That's how we can consume messages of from a Kafka topic in a Spring Boot application. I hope you guys understood it. As usual, this particular project will be available in GitHub. You can take it from GitHub. You can fork it and modify and try it out. If you like the video, go ahead and like it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to it. Meet you again in the next video. Thank you very much.